I'm so glad you're here listening to the Sustain Your Passion podcast. I'm Genesis, your host and business development expert. If you're ready to make a bigger impact and income while helping others, then you're in the right place. Thanks for joining me, and I can't wait to help you sustain your passion. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Sustain Your Passion. Today, I am hosting Grisha Stewart of Grisha Stewart Academy and Stellar Village. And Grisha is someone who I've been learning from online. I've got friends that have been through her programs and courses and just rave about her work. And so I wanted to chat with her about being an academic that's creating cool programs and helping people learn through their courses and offerings, and also leading your business online with shifts and changes and rebranding and making sure that you're living in alignment in your business. And so I think Grisha's got a lot to share with us, and I'll have her introduce herself here and then launch into some questions. So Grisha, can you tell folks a bit more about you and where they can find you online?
Sure. So my work, well, first they can find me at stellarvillage.org and also my personal website, which is grishastewart.com, GRISHASTEWART. And yeah, my passion is really about helping people find their passion, which has been through dog training for about 20 years. Before that, I was a mathematician. um, Interestingly, before that, I was working as a mechanic or a really like a lube technician at a tire place, but still doing the same work. And so I've finally recently come to discover that I want my vision to be broader, or more the online school to be bigger. I've had a dog school online for the last probably 10 years, and really especially for the last 4 years has been collaborative and bringing folks in. And now I'm bringing in people outside of the dog world, like music and all kinds of things. So I'm a lateral thinker, I guess you could
I
say.
love it. That's so cool. And so how has that shown up in your business? I hear, some career changes there, right? But as you've navigated your business for the last 10 years, how did things get started? And I'd love to hear more about how these collaborators and you were finding each other and how you're speaking into each other's lives. Just anywhere you want to go with that question?
Sure. And so I started the dog training business. So as a dog trainer at all, 20 years ago was when I started my business. And then 10 years ago is when it started to be online as well. Um, yeah, let's see. Could you, I pretty much that's all I could hold in my brain for, for just now. Could you say the question one more time?
Yes, of course. I have a tendency of asking like very wordy questions. So I love that you're like, wait, which part?
I've been on
So
sabbatical all summer too. So I'm a little bit out of practice of the
I love that.
interview. So.
Likewise, it's been a minute since I've done a recording. Okay, we're both getting back into fall. I love it. So,
Yes.
can you just talk a bit about how you pivoted? Let's just start with that question. How did you decide to go from personally doing dog training into, you know, creating your offers?
Thank you. So, all right. So basically, I had a dog. I fell in love with the concept of training. I read 50 books in one summer and I started, taking all the classes. The pivot came when I was in a class and someone said, "You know what? You remind me of myself when I became a dog trainer." And I was like, "Wait, become a dog trainer? Ooh."
Mm, mhm.
And so that planted the seed for me to be like, I could actually do this myself. And so I started volunteering and attending workshops, and there weren't really webinars, so many at that point, but attending live workshops in person. Patricia McConnell was one of my favorites at the beginning. And so basically what I did was um, I I started doing, I was a mathematician at the time. I was teaching classes at a community college at a tenure track position. And I started teaching classes at night and doing private sessions and kind of worked my way into from renting facility by the hour to having a facility with 3 rooms, to eventually selling that business because I had moved to like traveling around the world teaching other dog trainers, writing books, and teaching in different ways. So like I tend to sort of come up with a larger idea and then I can't really not go in that direction when once I see the vision or the larger way or the better way to train dogs, which is what I ended up coming up with. Um, Once I have that, I have a lot of drive to make that a reality.
Hmm. I love that phrasing there about, once you see the vision, it's hard to like put it down, right? And I think a lot of entrepreneurs can identify with that concept, especially about wanting to do things more efficiently or better, improve things. If you figure out a way that gets the job done in a less harmful, more impactful, higher, efficiency type of way, it makes sense to not only want to shift your practice, but then also help others with it. That reminds me, in my grad school program, we talked a lot about the concept of scholar practitioner work and how if you are regularly reading and writing, you've got that scholar role. But if you're
Hmm.
also practicing what you're reading and writing in your practice, you've got that practitioner role. And being in the hybrid space is where really cool, innovative ideas can come from. And it sounds like that's sort of what happened there for you, where you developed your training model. So, can you tell us a bit about that? I've heard it referenced as like the Sea Baddie program, which I always think of like she's a baddie kind of thing, but I think it's BATI, right? Or something like that.
It is. It is. Yeah. So
Okay.
the BA, so the I is instructor. The BAT part is the technique that I developed, or the more of the philosophy really that I developed that also has this operationalized like how to do it built in. And it's really the philosophy is about is working through dogs' reactivity or socializing puppies. It's a way of working at the dog's pace. There's a phrase that Adrienne Marie Brown says that's not about dog training that says moving at the speed of trust. And that's
Mm,
essentially what we're doing is we're going, allowing the dog to sort of tell us through their body language, are you comfortable at this distance? And if we start to see that they're not, then that's where we sort of tend to the moment by usually it's we're like slowing them down on a long leash to say, let's maybe not go any closer to that thing that scares you right now. And then just holding the moment and breathing, being in our bodies and allowing the dog to sort of take in things from a distance and recognize that they actually are safe and make that choice to turn away or go get more information or whatever it is. But putting a pause between the stimulus and response between seeing something and having to react to it. And so reactivity, that explosiveness is something I see in humanity as well. And so
yeah.
it's, I have a passion for finding ways to put ease in the world and reduce suffering. And so that's, as I sort of stretch and grow in my, toward elderhood, I turned 49 recently.
Yay,
As I stretch and
congrats.
Thanks. As I grow toward that, I see I see this, the common threads, right? And I see that like reactivity is what leads us to problems in XYZ area. And so, listening to experts in all those places, I wanted to, that's where this work is now heading is to like bring more and more of those people together. But I didn't really, I answered your question and then a whole lot more. So I'll stop there.
No, that's so good. That's exactly what I want to hear. That's so helpful. And I love the way that you are thinking about things so integrated. And, the concept of easing is something that I researched a bit in my mentorship research around easing folks into different life stages, easing identities. And so the
Mm,
concept of moving at the speed of trust really resonates for me. And I just recently picked up Adrienne Marie Brown book, Pleasure Activism, and
yes.
am loving it because it really comes at that perspective of like, why are we pushing to the point of reactivity? Why are we pushing to be growing at this, industrialized, capitalistic, greed driven
Yes.
space if we know it's not sustainable, it's not healthy, it's not supportive, it's actually moving us into a state of withdrawal and fear and trauma. And so I love hearing about this in the dog world as a dog mom that's, a little obsessed with them. I do have a tattoo of my dogs.
Nice.
But they are just so sweet and they both come from shelters. They both have reactivity, concerns that I try and help them with and support them. And that idea of just kind of pushing past threshold or moving too quickly is one that I'd love hearing about and talking about. So that's amazing that that is a technique that you were able to articulate and then get out there and share it with folks.
Yeah, I've managed to make it all the way around the world in lots of different settings to teach that to other dog trainers. And I love that it's become kind of part of the zeitgeist of how dog training is now. And so that feels like I've made, I've managed to sort of channel some information and put it, because I love learning, teaching anything that I learn, right? And so I'm like, ooh,
Mhm.
these two pieces go together, handing it over. Like, what do you guys do with this? Like, how,
Yeah.
and so the dog training world is becoming more and more liberatory. Uh, and on the other side, there's still lots and lots of, punishment and e-collars and people sort of bringing a sort of colonizer mindset to dogs,
Yeah.
of like, and also this concept that we have of perfection, like it has to be just so with this behavior, and whatever it is worth, whatever cost to the animal, whether it's the human animal or the non-human animal. And so there's um, a lot of places that we can sort of see that in the ways that humans treat each other, and there's a relationship that people have with their dogs that's sort of an echo of that often, both kind of on the systemic and the personal level.
Yeah, that makes so much sense to think about too, like power and oppression dynamics at play of, consent also plays into this with your dog,
Hmm.
right? And how are you
Hmm.
actually showing them they have choice and with partners as well, with relationships, with work engagements, like there's so much codependency at the root of it that ends up creating, I think, a lot of these like ultimatums or, must do type spaces. Dog must be sitting, even though dog is fine laying down and not doing the
Right.
thing you don't want them to do, but like they must be sitting, not laying down, or vice versa, right? When it's
Exactly.
like,
Yeah. And
is there a little
what are
more
the
space?
needs? Right. And what are the needs of this animal? We're just living in community,
Mhm.
right? And so it's like
Yeah.
all of us in my little household, right? It's like I have needs, my dogs have needs,
Mhm.
my husband has needs, and we
Mhm.
pull them together and we find a way that works for all of us.
Right.
So,
I love
yeah.
that. So cool. And so it sounds like you, were researching 50 books in one summer is amazing. Oh my goodness. I should start tracking my reading goals. That makes me want to know numbers too. I wish that there was a way to like look back at our life and be like, how many minutes have I actually spent on Zoom? How many books have I read? Oh, it'd be
And the
fascinating.
quality of life, right, is sort of
Yeah.
directly proportional to either the quality
Yes.
conversations on Zoom or the books that we read. Yeah.
Totally. That would be fascinating data to get my hands on. Uh, so you developed a technique, you were doing work, you brought your business online, you've been traveling and teaching. So it sounds like there's often, probably you run into this as well, the need for business, including sales and money transfers and things like that. And so for me, I love teaching my clients about different systems for getting paid. So things like barters, things like trade, scholarships, pay what you can, having multiple versions of your offer. So when I teach folks how to take their transformation, typically I'm working with new coaches, new trainers, new consultants that don't quite know exactly what they want their offer to be, but we're trying to really articulate it, get it clear so that they have a method they can then go and talk to people about and market so that people know what they're going to, be buying and what they're doing with them, not just kind of these vague hours that they're buying, but actually a program or a curriculum attached to what they're selling. And in that process, a lot of times I try to encourage folks to offer their experience or their method in multiple price points. So we might have a
Mhm.
DIY version that's going to be low cost. We have a group offer. We have a one on one. We have a one on one with an in person environment or something like that. And just thinking through how you would then shift your engagements with your learners through those different tiers so that you can be more accessible and have more open access to the knowledge you're trying to share, knowing that someone who's engaging in your free offers, right, your social media, your content, things like that might move into one of these offers later, and really
Mhm.
trying to think about the client journey at all those points. And I know that you have a scholarship program or process,
Mhm.
so I just wanted to hear more about that, knowing that that's something you are a bit more developed in than I have been able to get implemented into my business. But I personally really want to shape it a bit more with some more equity around it. Right now, it's kind of like if you know it's there and you reach out and I'm able to afford it, then I can provide. But I would really like to shape it more so that there's more clarity and visibility. So I just would love to hear your thoughts on how that got started, and um, we'll just start there. Can you tell me more about how you got started with offering scholarships?
Ooh, that's a good question. I don't exactly remember. So I mean, one thing is I'll just start at the very, very beginning, which is that I grew up in poverty,
Mm.
off the grid, with no electricity, no running water, by
Whoa.
those latter things by choice, the poverty sort of as a result of some choices of my parents.
Hmm.
And so I have a desire for people to be able to afford whatever it is that I offer. But particularly the part that's easiest for me to offer is the online school. And nowadays that's actually pretty much all of what I do. But I do also, in-person grief ritual. And so I'll talk about both of those. So the do you mind if I just dive into what they look like, or
Yes,
do
please.
you
I'm
have
all
more questions?
ears. Yeah, let's
Okay.
go.
Okay, so our scholarship program, there's a need-based, and there's also so basically anybody who is person of global majority or BIPOC gets free access. So that's like lifetime membership. People have basically their ancestors have prepaid, as far as I'm concerned.
Oof,
Um,
I love that. That is powerful. Oh my gosh. I just
yes.
want to sit with that for a quick second.
Yeah.
Oof, that is so real. And yeah, that's it, right? And it's often folks talk about like marginalized communities or underserved communities, and it's like, no, there was like deliberate action taken. And yeah, our ancestors have
Hmm.
paid. Oof, thank you for sharing that wisdom. Okay, I won't interrupt.
Yeah.
Keep going, keep
Yeah,
going.
no, that's fine. I mean, I live in the US. We would not be where we are without unpaid
Mm-hmm.
labor. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and the land, I mean, and stealing land, right? So between the two
Right.
of those
Yep.
things, right?
We are on stolen
So
land. Yep.
yes. So and then so need-based, which then effectively is just for white people. Is that basically people can get a 6-month scholarship, just fill out an application and say, a couple of questions. Um, and so that's 6 months, potentially renewable, usually renewable. Yeah. And we're kind of like debating on whether we want sort of a half price version, like a half scholarship. We probably will offer something like that. I know in my growing up that my mom probably would not have taken a free scholarship, and a half off would have meant that we actually afforded it enough to go to it.
Yeah.
So I just want that option to be there as well.
Mhm.
Um, and then my other work, so we do in-person grief ritual, basically chances to get together and grieve. And this is in the Dagara tradition, in part, just name that, brought by Sobonfu Somé and Malidoma Somé to the States as a way for to help the people of their village and of their continent, because their notion is that the world is not grieving enough, and that is why we're imploding. Um,
Mm.
and
Mm.
so a portion of the proceeds goes to that village, particularly to the Somes. And anyway, so the part that people pay, it's actually totally by donation, the way we do that. And so there's a suggested amount, and there's different options, but people can do whatever they want for that. And
Oh.
I find that people do tend to compensate at the level that they can, and so it's worth it for the effort that we put in, and it's also then accessible to folks. I did have to put a cancellation policy that if people did sign up for free and that they canceled, that there's kind of a there's you kind of get not one chance exactly, but like there's a bigger process to be able
Mhm.
to attend for free the next time. So we don't just keep giving away the slots because it's a limited space.
Yep, that makes sense. I love that where it's not, punitive, but there is a higher, you know, air quote barrier for engagement to make
Exactly.
sure that there is that buy-in, which is something that I deeply believe in as well as reciprocity. So part of the liberatory mentorship model liberationships that I write about and teach about is the concept of reciprocity in relationship, and how that buy-in on both parties is really where the shared space and the shared voice can come from. And oftentimes if there's an imbalance, to your point, right, you may not be able to show up for reasons that are, I am not invested, sure, but also I don't feel right accepting this free gift.
Hmm.
And so people want to contribute back to their community. And that is, I believe, like a need that we don't talk enough about is the feeling of contribution and how to actually, how important that is to one's sense of purpose in life and
Hmm.
spirituality. And so I love that you're creating these spaces with that in mind, knowing that, hey, if your contribution looks one way or another, that's your business. But we want you here. You're welcome. And here's what we need from you to participate. Like I love the clarity there. And that's really what I want to work into because this last year, I generally don't talk prices until I'm having a one on one with someone. And I try to have a personal conversation where I say, here's my range of rates, here's my range of offers. What's best for you to both feel bought in? What's going to hold you accountable to showing up and doing the work,
Hmm.
but not scare you so much you become paralyzed by a financial decision that actually keeps you in fight or flight. And then you can't actually do the deep learning we need to do to help you grow. And so
Oof,
trying
I
to
love
find their
that.
sweet spot, right? And so I've been thinking through maybe a rubric or something like that that articulates that concept and gives people some ideas of what that could look like. Maybe a bit akin to what you're talking about with that half price point as well. So this is just so cool. I also would love
Mm,
to hear more about the form you mentioned. You said that there's some questions on there. The background for me is that I also grew up in poverty. I was a scholarship student through and through. And it was 100% scholarships that helped me get away from toxic people as well and childhood abusers. And
mm,
I
mhm,
believe education is absolutely like the number one gift that we can offer each other
mm,
and is should be more accessible. And so that has led to working with first generation and low income college students, doing some interesting process improvement on scholarship processes in general at universities too, to look at how hard are we making it for the
mhm.
people that need support the most to get it.
Right.
And so are we recreating barriers through our processes and do we need them to be there? And so I'm sure that's something you've been cognizant of. I heard you
Yep.
mention that there's just a couple questions on the form, right? And there's that balance of do we ask for proof or not? And self disclosure is hard enough, like all of those pieces, right? And generally, people don't
Mhm.
abuse the system, but you also might want to be aware of that. So, can you just talk on that a little bit of how you decided what questions to include in your application process?
Yeah, thanks for that. I totally put the effort or the thought into that as well of yeah, not wanting it to be this sort of you have to be sort of the threshold of yeah, I didn't want it to be I'm sorry, I'm looking at I'm not talking well because I'm simultaneously trying to look it up on my site to see like what are the questions.
Nice. That's
Um
great.
like stop brain, you can really only do one thing at a time. So
Right.
yeah, so to my memory I'll have to look at it later, but I'm pretty sure it just says like what's your intention of contributing to the world with this
Mm,
information, was one, and then there's no like proof of things because yeah, I'm gonna trust people on that.
yeah.
I do have a statement that's like please make sure that you really need this, sort of like um with some clarity around that. And yeah, I think there's yeah, two questions, maybe one. That's the only one I can think of right now.
That's perfect. I love that, right? Like there's something about money and sales that I think more people need to hear about that's really like it's not your business what somebody else's money situation is and like that boundary, especially in the sales process can get really fucked up. um and
Yes.
especially around scholarships and things. And so I just love that it is, broad enough to empower and trust people to make the right decision for themselves and even if we were to look at someone and come up with our own judgments of what their finances look like, we don't know what they're going through if they, have medical illness bills that they're taking care of, if they are a caregiver for lots of folks, or, they're paying off debts from a divorce like I am from this year. And so you
Mhm.
never know. And I just appreciate that, yeah, you're not increasing the barrier to participation, right? You're looking at it through that lens of inclusivity. So that helps me a lot too to think about that it's really what do you need to know, right? And for me, it's that if I hear someone say, like, I have been trying to prioritize this, I've been doing all the work I can to learn it on my own, but I just can't get things going. I'm like, perfect. Like, yep, you have the drive. And that feels akin to your question of, what's the purpose that you want to have with this learning in the world? And there's a lot of passionate people that could be making a big difference if they had more support. So I just love that.
Yeah. And frankly, I'd rather be giving someone a scholarship that doesn't deserve it than not giving a scholarship to someone who needs it.
Yes, right? More people doing the work is good. Okay, so it sounds like you were able to find the questions. Can you tell me what you've got?
So one is, are you working as a dog professional? If so, what's the name of the business? And that's optional. And then there is a thing that said, for the need-based scholarship, it says basically, on my word, I'm truly not able to afford it at this time. I'll notify the Grisha Stewart Academy if this changes. And then the main question is, how will this education help you benefit the world? And then another box that just says additional info. Um, and then there's, yeah, some clarity around kind of what affording looks like. Okay, so the statement says if you have discretionary spending that you could change without hardship to be able to afford the membership, especially money that's going to a corporation, I'd prefer that you do a membership instead of a
Ooh,
scholarship. So,
cool.
so that's what I mean by afford. So, and then there's also
Uh-huh.
like if you live in a country where, dog trainers earn $10 an hour, then definitely get a
Mm.
scholarship. So that's kind of gives some ideas of like, if you have to choose between this money to get an education or buying business cards, then get the scholarship.
Mm. Hmm. So cool. Oh, I love that. I am definitely gonna take a peek for some inspo as I'm articulating my scholarship. And anyone that's listening, definitely head over to Grisha's website and review this because when folks figure out a path, it's totally okay to let that shine into your path as well. So thank you for sharing and for doing this work. That's so cool.
Thank you. Yeah. And I'm seeing that past Grisha actually did set up a 50% off version as well. So
Nice. Okay. I love that.
yay.
I always say things past Genesis are like, that's a problem for future Genesis.
Yes, exactly. I do try to take care of future me as much as I can, but
Mm.
yes, sometimes not.
Yeah, right. Very cool. And so it sounds like, you've made a big impact and you're on to a new stage with your business as well. Can you talk to me a bit about the evolution of where your work is today and what's coming next this fall with your collaborators and Stellar Village?
Sure. Yeah, I'm so excited. This has been a long time coming. For the last probably 2 years. I've been sort of like, oh, I've been taking all these classes from these other people and I love this information and I really wish my dog community knew this information and like, oh, I love these people. I wish they knew the dog people. And so basically, yeah, so I started gathering collaborators and it really came through this summer. Um, and while I was taking a sabbatical of like what the structure looks like, because for a long time I was thinking a whole separate school, and so it was this summer that I decided to actually blend them into one space and to have it be more than a school and have it actually be a collaborative village, basically, where there are there will be song circles, there will be grief circles, there will be classes. There will be spaces. This is all online. There will be spaces for people to collaborate. So if someone's like, I actually have an idea that I would like to share to the community, and so everybody can get together and discuss it in that spot. And so there's a way for people to like network with each other. And so yeah, I've one of the people that we've brought together as kind of the core team is we're calling it the Butterfly Council. And just because of transformation and butterfly
Yeah,
effect and all
right.
the beautiful metaphors and so but Aaron Johnson is one of those people. He's an activist, calls himself a touch activist, which is essentially his work is about bringing tenderness to Black men, particularly sort of dismantling the sort of black brute archetype,
Hmm.
and to helping people understand, helping Black men understand that it's okay to hold hands, it's okay to touch skin to each other, and regulate nervous systems and be tender emotionally as well as physically.
Wow.
And so that work in the saving lives of Black men involves also the liberatory work of teaching all groups of people, and so liberation, particularly for PGM, but also working with transphobia, ableism, all the things, And his work is just so love-based, and trauma-informed and carnage-informed. And so I adore Aaron. We just did a workshop, or I just attended a workshop that he was part of. We've been in collaboration for a while now. And this last little meetup was like all of these different leaders together. And three of the people that were there were actually people who are already on the Butterfly Council. So one was Aaron, one is Danny, also goes by Osprey musically, who is one of the actually touch activists. Whoa, have taken Aaron's training, and also just writes these beautiful songs, and is a song leader. And so Danny will be leading song circles in Stellar Village where people can contribute their own songs. And then also there will be one particular one where they'll be leading their own song circle. And so that's coming up really soon. And Aaron's going to be teaching a class on featuring he's got a movie called Dark and Tender that talks about the work that I just shared of his. And so he'll be introducing that work, and then how that weaves in with the dog world, and how touch doesn't necessarily have to be so platonic touch doesn't have to necessarily be with humans either. So part of a touch plan of how people can get sufficient amounts of emotionally, you know, um, yummy contact is, teaching how to snuggle with the dog, and like how a dog
Mhm.
can like nose bunk people to say like, hey, remember you have a body. Um, and yeah, so that's going to be part of the school. And yeah, there's just so many. I've got a ton of people. Shaniqua Trotman is a song leader, and she will be doing co-hosting the song circles, and we're bringing in all kinds of different song leaders as well. And so there's 15 people on the council, and it's a diverse group. It's about half PGM. There's three trans folks. There's people who are over 70. There's people who are two people that are under 18. So trying to get like a whole range. And then two of them are biologically related to me, and so and one uh, generation below that is not. But so we've actually got four generations of my family within it as well.
Wow.
So I'm really excited for this to be rooted in love, and like these are all people that I love in my life who are doing this work together.
I love that so much because that's the community, right? Like at its heart, I think that in so many ways, um, people are missing that community space and true intimacy and connection and being able to be honest about who they are, what they believe, what they want to create. And you're doing that. Like you're not only modeling it for your family and your generation, that you shared like multiple generations in your family, but also those around you and the world. That impact has got to feel so good to know that
Hmm.
it's by sharing your voice, right? And that's something I try to ask people about. And if you're okay with this, I'd love to hear your thoughts as well. um when do you first remember feeling like, okay, I have something to contribute here? Because that can be a huge barrier for people to actually feel worthy of contributing knowledge. And I've got thoughts about how we are all creators, and um, you have your lived experience for a purpose, and we all have that shared collective experience. And what a beautiful gift it is to share with others. But I'm curious, when do you remember feeling like I could teach this? Like, whatever this was, but when you first really stepped into your space as a community leader, what was that like
Hmm.
for you?
Mm. Well, let's see. Yeah, there's been, waves of like yes and doubt, along the way.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'll circle, you said that, kind of at the beginning. So the I was actually in a club when I was in high school. And it was interestingly and embarrassingly, it was called Future Homemakers of America.
Oh.
And I was like a regional officer, and they wanted us to teach like something. And so I read a book about time management, and did a presentation about that to the folks that were there. And I was like, oh, I can learn something and know more about it than other people, and so they don't have to read the book. I can convey this information faster.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so that was kind of one of the places where I really started enjoying the concept of teaching. We did a class when I was in high school, and I will go forward to more career stuff. But there was a class in high school where the math class, we had one teacher, but who was teaching two classes simultaneously. And so there was four of us in the back that just had a book. And we were more advanced, just kind of working our way through this book. So we didn't have to do the other content because we knew that part. And so we're teaching each other. And so that's again a place where I got some experience as a teacher. Um, and then, but really in terms of the dog stuff, the place where I really shifted out of being kind of a receiver of dog information and then just teaching people with dogs to the kind of the next level of teaching dog trainers was when I was working through a technique, and this is where got developed. So I was working through like all these other ways of doing it, and they weren't working. And then I found a way that was more humane. And so I was like, well, people need to know this. And so I was, taught it to my students, but then um, I started getting, some questions about it from other dog trainers. And then I kind of brought it to a conference, just like at a round table, and said, I have this thing, and people were piling around the table interested. And then so I applied to be a speaker the next year. And yeah, so it just kind of like bootstrapped up. And so a huge piece of it is connection. It's people having faith in me. And so that's where I try to extend that now, is to see like, ooh, you have something. Let's hear more about that. Um, and so that's like a lot of my school now, pre Stellar Village, that when it's just the dog school, is bringing in a lot of speakers who are some are more experienced, but a lot of them aren't, and sort of encouraging more of that. So yeah, I do think we all have something to share. And I do think also that we all belong in community and that we have our gifts and we have something to contribute.
Absolutely. I love that. My stepfather passed away when I was 14, but he left a lasting impression for me with one of his favorite quotes that was, everyone you meet has something that they know better than anyone else they know. And
Mm.
your job is to figure out what that thing is of theirs and try to
Oh,
learn it from them in some capacity. And I just love that concept of, every being has something to contribute into your knowledge and your existence and your brain and your experience to shape it. And it sounds like you really have brought that to life in your space as well. I started this last year and I hope to do it again next year to host an online summit where I invite my students to present their work as well. Because similarly, I think, that first space of conferencing, of sharing your ideas, of having people respond back and pour into your thinking is where some of the best and most innovative ideas can come from. And so I am so glad to hear that that is happening in your school as well, and that that concept is you know taking life, because I think it's in those casual spaces where people say the offhand comment that's kind of like earth shattering for someone else, right? And it's like, oh wait,
mm.
we should talk. Like there's a connection here. Let's keep exploring this together. And that is just beautiful. Oh, how cool. I wish I was a dog trainer.
Genesis, Genesis, I love your work. Like every little description of that, I'm like, yes, yes, we need that in the world. In fact, I probably at some point will be inviting you to Stellar Village to see if you want to present something or, yeah,
Cool. I
that's
would
pretty
love
neat.
that. Yeah, as you were just talking about the contribution and reciprocity. So the model that we co-developed, Kim McAloney and I, the outcomes of it are personal growth, validation of self, and increased contribution to your community.
Mm,
And so the way that you engage through liberationships or liberatory relationships is what we articulated. And it's that same concept of like teachers teaching each other. We are all teachers on this journey if we can allow ourselves to learn from other people. But that like humbleness is difficult if we aren't committed to being okay with growing and having that humility. So I just really appreciate the opportunity to learn from you and to hear about your experiences. And thank you for sharing your wisdom here with me, but also in this podcast space where it'll go out to the folks in my community as well. The last thing I really want to hear a bit more about, if you're comfortable and have time,
mhm.
is your grief rituals. Can you just say a little bit more about like what that looks like? It sounds like they're in person, and I know I saw at one point like a flash of a social media post, but there's billions of them. So talk to me a little bit about that work. I am so interested.
Sure. So yeah, basically the lineage of this, so like I said, is from Sobonfu and Malidoma Some's people, so the Dogra people in Burkina Faso, as well as the work of Francis Weller. Um, a whole bunch of names that just fell out of my head. So anyway, what happens in these ritual spaces is basically a sort of a chance to be to set time aside and to be just present. And so the what we do in ours is we have some psychoeducation, basically teaching people about grief, giving people a chance to know that grief is how universal it is, and how it's not just about losing someone, but it can come from all kinds of things. And Francis Weller has the five or six, depending on how you do it, gates of grief. So we go through that. So ways to access grief, things like recognizing that we're linked to the sorrows of the world. We are there. We're grieving things that we expected as beings on this planet, but did not receive. And so all these different ways that grief might show up, and that then it presents in all these ways of aggression or suppression or oppression, right? So the grief is a it blocks the channel essentially. And so there's a little bit of teaching, and then it's mostly experiential. People talking to each other in small groups, sharing their stories, releasing, using fresh words. So fresh words is a phrase I made up in my household for basically just anytime you're telling a story to use words you have not used before, so that you
Hmm.
can, yeah, so you can allow it to kind of change and transform.
Yeah,
Um,
carve some new neural pathways in how you're
exactly.
reframing. Cool.
Yes, exactly. So yeah, and so it's essentially it's a reframe every time you tell the story. And so it's, the story that I experienced when I was two, I can now rewrite as a 49-year-old.
Mm,
Especially if like every time I access it, right, it's becomes labile, and then I put it back slightly different, so
mm,
that trauma can unwind. And then the grief, there's the ritual part itself, and I'm still kind of in transform or I'm considering ways to transform this, because I think this can be too much for some people to be in grief space for so long. So I'm thinking more micro ritual, and less of this big ritual. But essentially, the big one is singing a song. And so there's a lot of songs that I make up. So usually it's like one of mine, and then couple of drummers in there. And then just people singing, dancing, and just getting into a space of being able to release their grief. And so there's a space to go to. There's an altar. There are people, put their um, sort of send the grief into. There's different altars for support and that sort of thing. And so just really holding people's whatever they're bringing, whether they're Christian or um, anything else. I'm not Christian, but I, was raised in this culture, so that's the one I name first.
mhm.
Um, and Interesting fun fact as an aside, I was reading Leticia Nieto's book, Beyond Liberation, or Beyond Inclusion, Beyond Empowerment, Liberation for All of Us. Great book.
Yeah.
And so she was talking about religious oppression, and kind of the being in the category of the oppressor, is that even if we're not Christian, if like the God that I don't believe in is Christian, then I'm in that lane. So I thought that was
Interesting.
interesting. Yeah. Um, so anyway, so it's an experience to just get together and be with the grief, and then we kind of, process afterwards, so people kind of put people back together so that they can be transformed.
Wow. Yeah, that sounds beautiful and abnormal, right? Like that's not something you hear about every day. Like I feel like one of the most common places that this type of work is happening is in a very clinical setting in a therapist's office where it's one-on-one, you're kind of hyper focused on and being analyzed. And there's, intention or work around what the goal state is. And that there's kind of this implication that you're broken right now and we're trying to heal you versus
Right?
a space of like, you're just a human experiencing a thing, and like that's okay, and let's acknowledge it and let it be, instead of trying to like
Yes.
stuff it down, which totally tracks with that idea of, suppressed emotions getting shown up in different spaces where we don't even mean to be trying to take power over another being, but we have to in order to feel enough presence and power in our space to keep going. And then that gets, pushed into unhealthy space where, people try taking over other people's rights. And gosh, what if we had more spaces to be in community where we're feeling those darker, harder, more unpleasant thoughts that we, especially in our capitalistic society, just don't fucking have time to feel. Like
Hmm.
realistically, if you're
Hmm.
feeling a huge grief and you aren't given space and time to feel it, you are, your brain is working through it. It's just happening a little bit all the time and probably out of your control, versus if you were to give it that space and time, look at it, give light to it, feel it, then you might be able to work more with it in your day to day. And to your earlier point, rewrite some and integrate it in a more empowering type of way where you get your self authorship back and you are able to see, what that experience meant to you. But that meaning making is so often done in isolation. And so this community space sounds incredibly liberating for the human condition of releasing pain and releasing trauma, actually doing that work in a modality that sounds so freeing and probably challenges the hell out of your participants.
Hmm.
Sometimes I'll be on coaching calls with clients and they're having a really hard time, and I, ask them to put on a song and mute me and just dance to it or sing to it for, a minute or two, because there's something so freeing about being present with your body and moving it however it wants to move and feeling whatever it wants to come up. But we're always trying to control the experience. And that's that industrialization that forces us to be at a certain place at a certain time and behave a certain way and feel a certain way without, wiggle room for the squishiness of being a human, that includes these emotions. So wow, what brought you into that line of work? So I've heard, math, I've heard dog training. It sounds like I can understand it from the space of, you know, you read the right books as a teacher, right? But you found those philosophies and those pedagogies that brought the human into the training space. But grief specifically is such a hard space to work in if you don't like personally have experience with it, is what I found. Like it's one of those things that like you can meet people as deep as you've felt your own pains. And so
Hmm.
I'm curious, like what brought you into that space and how did you find the courage to start those spaces?
Hmm. Yeah. The so that my um apprenticeship to grief is what Francis Weller calls it. My apprenticeship to grief started with when I lost my dog. That was one grief that kind of like got me going of like, oh, actually my rewind, my ex-wife, her father died, and I saw the way that she grieved and like, oh, you can actually give yourself permission to feel all the feelings at this point. I'm like, ooh, that's interesting. File that away. And then later, when Peanut died, he when in his passing, I gave myself permission to cry, which I had not really done much of in my life. So we'd been told through various means to not cry, and that it's much more impressive when you don't. And so we, my family had a large rug under which we put all of our emotions,
Mm.
basically. Um, and yeah, so what we did, or what I did in that time, was just give myself permission to feel all the feels, whether it's anger or frustration or sadness or shame or any of the things, because they come up in cycles and waves and all the things, and so that was a really freeing time for me. So that was one piece. And I read some books on grief, and that helped, and got a therapist, and that helped, and kind of came out of there a little bit better at dealing with my emotions. And then fast forward to having a relationship with my now late husband, who's experiencing, you could call it a spiritual crisis, you could call it a schizophrenic break. psychotic break. But for before we got together, he was going through this experience. And every day was a choice for him to live. And that is when I really delved into as much as I could learn about the how what it was to be human. So that was, lots of reading, lots of therapy, the work, all the things, and sort of an attempt that I now, we won't go down that road, but like at first it was the attempt to sort of fix him, and then it was the realization to let him be exactly who he is, and give space for that, the healing that the human has capacity to do when held by community. And we did never end up with a large enough community that could hold him. And so he eventually died by suicide, which was, yeah, the most painful thing that has ever happened to me. And I had taken time, I'd lightened my schedule to be able to be with him, and to be present with him. And so the 3 years that we were together was the 40 years of connection, because we spent a lot of time together. And I had the time to grieve as well, because of the spaciousness that I sort of created of just, bring down expenses and you don't have to work as much. And at least with what I was able to earn as a trainer. Um, and my therapist recommended that I get into more of a somatic practice. So I got into ecstatic dance, and took a class on grief and worked through. The grief recovery handbook was really a great set of structures to it. And yeah, and just felt more like simultaneously sorrowful and alive, and like I was on the right path when I was doing this work, with myself, and was able to see people more exactly as who they were because of Bryce and because of the work, was it what I was taking in. Um, and I took a training with the Hearing Voices Network. There's a whole this which I had wished that I had had when Bryce was still alive, but of how to facilitate spaces with people in altered states, rather than the more medical model. So that was part of this. And then kind of the way that I got into Sabon Fu and Maladoma's work was, so fast forward, eventually met my now husband, who was had taken two classes or two gone to two grief rituals in person with Sabon Fu, back when she was alive, and so I was invited then to go attend another one, and that really got me going into, wow, this is amazing and very transformative. And so I've attended multiples of those with different people leading, and it's always done in a team. So I have after taking a training with Francis Weller, like a 5 month training with him and a team of people that he had, including Alexandre Yodun. Anyway, so I met someone in there who's a therapist who we now co-lead, co-facilitate these grief rituals.
Wow, that's incredible. And thank you so much for your sharing today. I know from personal experience, at least for me, recalling those experiences and those past traumas can feel really challenging, and also a space to work with them. And like you said earlier, have was it new words? Fresh words?
Fresh words,
Fresh
yep.
words? Yeah, yeah. So I just really appreciate you and your vulnerability and honesty here today with me because you know, likewise, grief is something that, yeah, I love the way you explained it earlier of how often too the missed piece is the expectations that were not met, and the lives that we think we're going to have, the paths we see before us that are our motivators and our reason for moving forward, and then having that path ripped away or changed or dropped and darkened in somehow in some way, gives pause to folks that are struggling. And so that concept, though, is, foundational requirement of being able to be safe and secure, to be able to get to those higher level contributions, right? You've got to have like personal safety and healing to be able to even know, like, well, is it worth me getting out there and sharing my idea? Can I train other people in this space? Um, and so it seems obvious now, just thinking about it and talking it through with you, that like, of course, that should be part of what educators and mentors are doing with their practices, because the emotions that you're carrying with you every day are going to show up in the way that you impact the people that you are in space with. And so then grieving needs to be part of your practice. And
Yeah.
part of my daily self-love habits is self-forgiveness. And I think
Hmm.
there's an overlap there, right? Of the wish I could have, the shoulda, coulda, wouldas kind of statements, right? And being at peace with what has happened and where we are and where we're going is, gosh, the hardest part about being a human, that presence.
Yes.
And so it makes so much sense when you're doing people work, though, and especially in similar conversations it sounds like we get to have with folks like helping helpers. It's so important to be able to truly show up and hold space for others, and that requires, shedding of your own blockages as well, and things that keep you at keep others at an arm's length for yourself, which often can be rooted in grief and shame. And um, damn, that sounds cool. Where do you host these retreats or these spaces, these rituals? Where are you in the world? I actually am not
Where,
totally sure.
yeah. So I'm in Oregon
Oh
and
shit,
then
me too.
oh, snap. All right. Yeah, I'll
We're gonna
give
have to
you
meet
more
up.
information. Yeah, yeah. So, yes. And right now the grief rituals live at stellarvillage.com, which
Cool.
eventually the whole Stellar Village will live there. But people can find the grief rituals through that site once we shift things around. Yeah. And back to your point, there's so many, like we could talk for like
I
17
know,
hours.
right?
Um, but your one point that I wanted to follow up on is a gate of grief that I left out, which you essentially named, which is harms we have done or been complicit in as well.
Mm.
And this
Hmm.
work of liberation can't be done without grief, whether it's grief for our personal things or ancestral grief. It's all, we can't do this without grief, or it just turns into people being aggressive to each other.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. Gosh, I hope you're working on a book about this. Like, I want to read that book. If you're not, if you'd like to, can I help you with it? Because, oh my gosh, you have so much good wisdom here to share. That's beautiful.
Thank you.
Wow.
I am actually working on a book on grief and dogs right now. So people who have lost dogs, and that's kind of I want to sort of build a bridge to the dog world for one thing, and also express this information I have to the dog world. And then my next book may or may not have anything to do with the dogs, but yeah, this stuff is it's so important.
Mm.
And I think it's like I don't have to know more than everyone. I just have to know more than some people know, that they're willing, that they're needing to learn and wanting to learn, and write in a way that speaks to them. Because there's, we're all needed in the world.
That is so beautiful. And, one of the core lessons I hope people hear from, setting goals and creating an action plan that's sustainable for them is being a full human in their work and allowing all the feels. If you hear little snarls to the side, my dogs are getting ready for being fed. And so they've got some happy dances going over here. Um,
Mm.
they're rolling around on the bed. It's very cute. But I think that, yeah, there's so much in that space of confidence and courage that really just comes from clarity of, I don't have to know everything. I don't have to be the smartest person to have something to contribute. Sometimes it's a smile on the street that radically changes a person's day, and you may not have even thought about it for a second, that of course you're going to smile at somebody when you walk by, but it's those small contributions and every detail that counts to keep us all connected and moving forward. So, oh, just thank you for being you, for reading all the books, for chasing your passions and bringing together people that can speak into your life, and then having the courage to speak into others' lives, because yeah, it's ultimately, we're all here as a product of others and to hopefully leave a legacy that we're proud of. So I really
Mm.
appreciate your time today and look forward to continuing to connect with you and in different ways, whatever that looks like. And for sure, following you on all the spaces. So if you could just tell folks where they can find you again, and if you have any closing words you want to share before we wrap up, that would be great.
Okay. So to find me, it would be at stellarvillage.com or .org, and then also grishastewart.com. And yeah, what was the last part? I'm sorry.
Any
I
other
forget.
closing words you'd like to share? We've
Oh,
touched on
good.
a lot of things today, so there's no right answer, but anything that comes to mind you might want to close out with.
Yeah, I would like to close out with the one of the bigger transformations that I've allowed to happen recently is to shift out of the mode of expert, not just recently, but kind of in the last probably 5 years, is to shift out of that mode of thinking that I had to know everything and more that like I can surround myself with people I admire and platform them. And so that's been something that's a really juicy, lovely place to be because then I get to stay as a learner.
I love that community builder piece. Ah, that's so cool. And yeah, that allows you to bring your philosophies and values to life, but through different voices and different experiences. That is really cool. Thank you for sharing that.
Thanks, Genesis.
Yeah. All right. Well, everybody, you know where to find Grisha. You know where to find me online. Connect with us if you heard something today that spoke to you. If you want to collaborate, it sounds like we are both big fans of connection, community, and collaboration. So reach out if you have follow up thoughts. But otherwise, I hope that you took something helpful from this episode and that you'll be back again when I post the next one. Thanks, everyone. Take care. And thank you, Grisha.
Mm, thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Sustain Your Passion podcast. If this episode helped you gain a bit more clarity, courage, or confidence, please share it with your friends on social media or in a text. It would mean the world to me. Thanks in advance for sharing this episode. I hope you have a great week, and I'll talk to you soon.